morning. Tonight's the night we link up live with Radio 1 FM, where Mark Goodyear is already in full flow. And if you can pick up stereo Radio 1, you can join us in trying out an intriguing effect that promises to produce stereo sound, not just from between your speakers in the normal way, but from outside them and even from all around the room. Well, if you want to try this out, you'll find Stereo Radio 1 on FM between 97.6 and 99.8, depending on your area. And to judge the effect, you'll need to sit back from your speakers and halfway between them, like this.
Thank you, Howard. We'll be testing that 3D stereo in just over 10 minutes, so be prepared. Also tonight, why the new terminal at Stansted Airport is designed not to take off. Who or what is keeping an eye on your chocolates? And how South Korea plans to clean up in home electronics. First though, Peter.
If you have a problem with self-image, then remember that the reflection that you see depends on the shape of the mirror. If, though, you have a mirror that can vary the effect, like this flexible mirror, then that can be rather more interesting, because if I pump air into this mirror, it bulges and you can see the whole of my face. But if I suck that air back out again, it becomes concave and you get a rather fine close-up of my mouth. Yes? Well, please yourselves. Now, inflatable mirrors aren't new, but they've never been able to offer good quality optics. But a group from Oxford University has come up with a simple improvement, allowing flexible optics to find some serious uses, like this instrument for testing eyes. Now, these lenses are made up of twin layers of very thin plastic, a plastic membrane which is filled with a clear liquid. So all I have to do is to adjust the pressure by turning each of these dials, and then I can read off the correct magnification for each eye. Now, this could become a useful alternative for opticians, replacing all of these fixed lenses with a single flexible lens. Tension across the lens is kept constant by pinning the membrane between these two specially designed seals, and when the frame is screwed down again, these flatten out and stretch the membrane from all sides. So when you pump the liquid in, the lens bulges evenly to keep distortion to a minimum. Now, this isn't going to replace high-quality optics, but the design is so cheap and simple that it could have many uses, like a magnifying glass that zooms in, or even variable spectacles, where you can adjust for close-up or far-off vision. Mind you, the makers are going to have to put in some work on the design of their products, or the glasses of the future may well look like this.
Airports can be so confusing. I once got so mixed up that I even missed my flight. So when Stansted was named as London's third airport, the first thing the authorities wanted was a new terminal building that made sense as soon as you walked in through the door. Architect Norman Foster's vision for the airport was a single-level building that you walk through in a straight line. From check-in, to passport control, to the duty-free, and finally, a train direct to the plane. No lifts, no escalators, no labyrinthine corridors. And the key to all this is overhead, a rather special roof, 198 metres by 198 metres, twice the area of Lord's Cricket Ground. But finding a way of supporting the roof without destroying the vision of open space needed a novel approach. Steel trees, 36 of them altogether. The trunk runs up through the floor from the basement and divides into 4 tubular branches. The 4 branches of each tree support the roof section immediately above, while the weight of the surrounding sections is shared between the branches of the neighbouring trees. If it wasn't for these steel rods attached to the ends of the branches, the structure would be as flimsy as it looks. The rods are actually pulled into position, tightened down onto a central joint. The rods then pull on the branches, keeping the whole tree rigid. The trees keep the roof up, but how do you keep it on? It can get pretty windy up here, And normally, when a stream of air hits the edge of a flat roof, it splits away from the surface, reducing the pressure, and so the roof could literally be sucked off by the wind. Well, in this case, the designers have avoided that by adding a baffle, which changes the pattern of the airflow. Now the air spills over the baffle into the dip beyond, creating a little whirlwind, so the air flows closer to the roof, reducing the suction effect. Along with the wind comes the rain. And another neat trick. With a traditional drainage system, the centre of the roof would have needed to be 2.5 metres higher than the edge. So instead, an idea from Scandinavia has been borrowed. Each panel drains into pipes that run under the roof along to downpipes at the edge. Because they're narrow, they fill up very quickly, and the downpipes taper, so that once they're full, a siphoning effect starts, which sucks the water quickly off the roof. The terminal's obviously a feat of engineering. With the drop in air ticket sales, perhaps now's not the best time to open a new airport, but eventually 8 million people a year should be using Stansted, and it's only then that Norman Foster will find out whether his vision for the friendly airport has worked.
Every year, Britain's blood transfusion service supplies over 1 million litres of blood, but maintaining that supply demands careful planning because blood has to be used within 5 weeks before it goes off. For years, scientists have been looking for ways to increase that time, and in fact, back in 1966, we looked at a technique for storing blood by freezing it in liquid nitrogen.
Before freezing, a glycerol solution is mixed with the red cells to protect them from breaking up during freezing. The mixture is blended, and when enough antifreeze is added, the contents of the bag are transferred to specially manufactured thin stainless steel containers, carefully marked to describe the contents.
The technique worked, but it's never been widely used because the glycerol antifreeze has to be removed before the blood is given to a patient. That glycerol was needed to protect the red blood cells from bursting as sharp ice crystals form inside them. Now, though, 25 years later, a new, simpler technique developed by the British Army is just starting clinical trials. It uses this harmless starch to protect the cells, and it doesn't have to be removed afterwards. As before, the blood is frozen in liquid nitrogen using a specially designed bag inside this frame. To remain usable, the blood must be frozen very quickly, so they've had to develop this special plastic bag which allows rapid cooling. Its large area ensures a thin layer of blood which will freeze uniformly, and the frame is needed to keep this thickness constant. Freezing takes about 30 seconds, so this one should just about be ready. Obviously, I have to protect myself against the liquid nitrogen, and once I've got it out, it's just a simple matter of removing 4 clips, and then we'll see whether it's frozen satisfactorily. It should be rock solid. And it certainly is. Whoops, there it is. Very solid. And it's just as simple to thaw it when you need to use it. All you need is a bucket of warm water. By making it this simple, the Army now has a method that could be used at mobile hospitals, but it could also help the transfusion service with rare blood groups for which they can't get a steady supply. And permanent stores at hospitals, airports and stations could soon be possible, so if there's a disaster, blood supplies could be on hand within minutes. Let's have a look at it. Yes? It's thawed through there. As you can see, it's ready to use. And if you're wondering how long frozen blood lasts, well, nobody yet knows. It's thought it will survive for at least 50 years. But it could be far, far longer. Now here's Peter with another of our regular reports on new business ventures.
Cranfield Institute of Technology, Bedfordshire, 1986. An industrial robotics class is lectured on automation and machine vision by Federico Margules.
All the processing that takes place in the computer is
Students come here from all over the world to gain their degrees, but 3 of this class of 86 were to end up staying in Britain and setting up business with, of all people, their lecturer.
The computer then addresses this array of pixels to analyze.
It all began with a PhD research project. Using TV cameras, Frank Meyer had come up with a novel way of teaching a robot complex movement.
And this will be followed by the vision system. Okay, so we lift it, cameras are following it, I go through space, and you see it on the monitors happening here,
Yeah.
and then go down.
It did away with time-consuming special programming by simply getting the robot to mimic Frank's actions.
And it's taking the robot through step by step along this path.
Since much of the Cranfield research was sponsored by the Ford Motor Company, their engine plant was an obvious place to find a job in the real world. This robot takes flywheels off a conveyor belt and slides them onto engine crankshafts. The flywheels must be rotated to line up with a key in each crankshaft, an obvious task for a vision system. It uses an ordinary surveillance camera to look at the end of the crankshaft and then search for the keyway, which it then marks with a cross. That information is then translated by Frank's computer into instructions to guide the robot. A straightforward solution that's still in use today. Integral Vision, as they now call themselves, was still a tiny company, but this success gave them the confidence to approach other large organizations.
So we went steaming ahead and quoted for all the large companies who might be interested in our products. We had miscalculated a fundamental fact, which is it takes a long time from an inquiry or a quotation to actually receiving an order.
In fact, the company was in serious debt, and their problems didn't disappear when orders were placed. Cadbury's asked them to monitor the size of fudge as it emerges, still hot, before being cut and coated in chocolate. But developing the system to give operators a clear display of fudge size took 3 months of special computer programming. Philippe Lasnier was given the job of shortening that time.
What we did was to create one program with always the same features and make it more or less standard. And now we just had to take that big program, add only the difference for the new application, and we are down to 2 weeks.
With Philippe's new program reducing development time, the future looked rosy. And at last the cash flow started. Their next goal was to design a range of standard vision systems to feed the information in. After these multiple TV cameras measuring fudge bars, came an infrared system for inspecting steel bars. A video microscope can even be used to check circuit boards. And now they're trying lasers.
With the laser, we can actually measure the height of a component as it's extruded. As you can see, as I move the part up and down, the laser beam is deflected, gets further away from its zero line, and that is picked up by the camera and gives us the height of the component.
This project was actually financed by a government SMART award and looks like finding another application in the British steel industry. These huge bars are made to very fine tolerances, and the laser system could be used to find out how much each bar bends along its length to within 1 millimeter per meter. Now they can produce equipment quickly for many applications. They're a victim of their own success and find their final problem is satisfying demand.
Installation. We're not going to be able to do anything until probably towards the end of May.
The constant inquiries are handled by Peter Ramsden.
We're short of personnel across all departments in the company, and the only way to overcome it is to expand.
Company resources are stretched as their cramped workshop tries to cope with new customers as well as existing ones coming back for more. That's why they think now is the time to expand. And their first step will take them full circle back to their beginnings. Federico and his old students are hoping to be the first occupants in a new science park being built at Cranfield.
Right, let's see what's on stereo Radio 1 FM.
Hi, good evening, Howard. My name's Mark Goodyear, and for once you can actually see as well as hear what's on Radio 1 FM.
It is good to see you, Mark. And are we ready to try out this new 3D stereo sound?
Yes, we are, and the idea is to let you at home or in your car judge for yourself. Just check this out.
Well, viewers in some parts of the country may already be watching BBC One TV with Nicam stereo sound. But if you've got an ordinary TV and can also pick up stereo Radio 1, turn your TV sound down and settle down between your speakers as we try out 3D stereo.
Well, the music industry has tried it before. It was called quadraphonic and it needed 2 speakers in front of you and 2 behind. It didn't take off. Perhaps it was too expensive. But the idea is still around and still a good idea. If you look on a regular Ghetto Blaster, there's often a wide stereo button.
In fact, yeah, that's right. That's a much simpler version of what we're going to try, which uses just the 2 channels of normal stereo, and you need no extra equipment at home. Right, first, let's test your system. Now, this sound should come only from your left speaker, and this one from the right. Now here's the start of our signature tune in normal stereo, where the sound seems to come only from between the speakers. OK, and now for the first time ever, in 3D stereo, which should sound a lot wider. Well, I'm hearing the trumpet and some of the strings and synthesizer sounds clearly moving around, so they do seem to be coming from well outside the speakers, over here and there. Mark, how do they sound to you?
It sounds very, very different. I mean, some of it sounds to be coming over my left shoulder. Kate, I know you were an engineer at Radio 1. Can you explain how it works?
Well, like ordinary stereo, it's just an illusion designed to fool the brain. The effect is added in at the recording studio. Now, I've got here the original recording of our signature tune. Now, if I fade up this horn here, the sound comes from right between the speakers, so obviously there isn't actually anything there. But if I make it slightly louder on the right-hand side, then the brain thinks the sound is coming from slightly over to the right. And I can make it come from completely over to the right there. Well, in pop music, all the instruments are separately recorded and then they're positioned like that so that they seem to fill the space between the speakers. But this new controller can move the sound even further than that because it doesn't only adjust the volume but also the time at which the sound arrives at each ear. For example, if the sound reaches my right ear just before my left ear, my brain will assume the source of that sound is nearer my right ear and place it somewhere out over to the right. So I can now move the sounds around in space. I think we can demonstrate it with the horn here. Now let's see, that's in the middle at the moment, but if I just put it over towards the left there, now I'll take it round to the right. Oh, it's gone away. It should come back in a moment. There it is, round to the right, and now even further, round beyond the speaker. It should be quite effective if we have a go on the synthesizer. Let's see what that sounds like. That over to the right first. And now, let's put that over, move it round on the left. What do you think then, Mark?
I think the music business has always been very keen on new gadgets and new technology, so bands and record producers will have a field day playing with this.
In practice, it is more complex because the processor varies other factors apart from just the time. It's been programmed from experiments in how the brain interprets real sounds. So it can even fool the brain into believing that some of the sounds might be coming from right behind you.
That's right, the system is also used in a video game here, and this is soon to be released on CD. And the idea of the music here is to just let you feel as if you're right in the middle of all this action. All right, well, Mark, what do you think the best sorts of music to benefit from this effect?
That's quite amazing. It sounds like the effect of flying around your head. That's Tim Simonon's Mega Blast. I think more subtly, Simple Minds are considering using it. And the Rolling Stones, I understand, for their next live album, are considering using it on some tracks. So you might end up thinking that you're in the audience when you're listening to the album.
Oh, good. I've always wanted to go to one of their gigs. Well, whether people will really go out and buy tracks because they are 3D stereo remains to be seen. But if you want to be one of the first to have it on CD, don't forget that we have a competition running. We're giving away 100 of these special discs, which include all the 3D music that you've heard tonight. Now, last week, we asked you, in what year were compact discs first introduced in this country? And as an extra clue, this piece of music was one of the first to be released on CD that year. Well, they don't come more familiar than that. Don't write to us, though, but do write to the address in the current issue of the Radio Times. Thanks a lot, Mark. Enjoy the rest of your show.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure, and we'll see how long the technology takes to actually pick up and become successful. And meanwhile, we'll continue the experiment on Radio 1.
This afternoon, 2 reports were published looking at possible links between children with leukemia and their fathers' occupations. The idea of such a link was first raised a year ago in a report on the cluster of leukemia cases around the nuclear reprocessing plant at Sellafield. That study found that men who'd been exposed to radiation at work fathered children who were more likely to develop the disease. The connection was completely unexpected, so scientists hoped that studies at other nuclear sites would either confirm the results or else show that the link didn't exist. But a study carried out at Dounreay and published today found no evidence either way. One of the difficulties with both studies is the small number of cases involved, but a second report published today looked at over 100 children with leukemia, and this report does suggest a link with the father's occupation, and not just in the nuclear industry. Fathers exposed to the industrial chemical benzene, to wood dust or to radiation were all more likely to have children who developed leukemia. The researchers warn that even 100 cases isn't enough to prove a link. But their results are likely to focus attention on the search for a biological mechanism, some genetic pathway, that could explain how a father's job could increase his child's risk of leukemia.
According to a report in this Monday's Wenhua Daily, zoologists in China are trying to find out why a panda called Jia Qin Shan Mei, which normally eats bamboo, is eating sheep. Although the giant panda has the digestion of a carnivore, it adapted to vegetarianism a long time ago and has an almost exclusively bamboo diet. But at regular intervals, bamboo plants flower and then die out across large areas of their mountain habitat, so pandas have to move on to find new supplies. This never used to be a problem, but as the human population in China expands, low-lying bamboo forests are being cut down for agriculture, and the last 1,000 pandas are losing this source of food. Scientists aren't sure whether this shortage accounts for Jia Qin Shan Mei's uncharacteristic behaviour. Even when she was discovered in the sheep pen, she refused to leave. So, is she just hungry, or could she be mad? She's now, as they say, under observation.
In a country that's well off the beaten tourist track for most people, it's somehow surprising to find so many familiar names on the market stalls. But these fashionable hallmarks of Western style are in fact manufactured here in South Korea. It's not all footwear and fancy goods, though. Korea is actually the largest manufacturer of microwave ovens in the world, and the third biggest producer of microchips. Browse in any high street from Stockholm to Sydney, and chances are most of the personal computers contain Korean-made memory chips. CDs, TVs, videos, you name it, the Koreans make it. Over the last 30 years, the country has undergone a complete transformation. An impoverished nation, rural and ravaged by war, has emerged a generation later as a high-tech economic superstar. Ironically, though, the very things that have enabled Korea's phenomenal progress now threaten its success on the electronic world stage. All the manufacturing technology used here has been imported from abroad, and it's this policy of borrowing and adapting technology, together with a cheap labour force, that's enabled Korea to catch up so rapidly and become extremely competitive. But no more. For the first time in years, exports have fallen, wages have increased dramatically, whilst more and more countries are starting to impose trade restrictions. And as Korea's costs rise, a whole string of new rivals, Thailand, Malaysia, the Philippines, are now stepping into Korea's shoes.
We have many problems. One of the big problems is that Korea is too much dependent on foreign technologies. Really, it is high time for us to develop homegrown leading-edge technologies. For this, Korean government earmarked nearly $5 billion over the 5 years.
Some of that funding is going into long-term scientific research, like the development of high-temperature superconductors. Some's being invested in a new generation of computer software. Welcome to tomorrow's world.
안녕하십니까? 미래의 세계입니다.
This is Korea's first speech synthesizer that recognises the written word. It's one of a number of sophisticated systems that are being developed here at the government-sponsored Electronics and Telecommunications Laboratory.
Would you please show me your tongue? Okay.
Some of these developments are already entering the marketplace. Tell this medical diagnosis system your symptoms, and it'll prescribe the treatment you need using its knowledge of Oriental medicine.
You must take a mixture of Chinese angelica and white peony roots.
Angelica and white peony roots?
Yes.
Many of the research projects here will take years to come to market, but some of the country's other new inventions are already starting to pick up. This remote control vacuum cleaner is more than just a gadget. It's one of a new range of so-called high-touch products. This one will give you food for thought. Well, I think I fancy a pizza. 열유라. 다추라. And while that's cooking, I'll show you my favourite. This is a computer for children, and it uses simple symbols instead of a keyboard. And the idea is to teach coordination and improve learning skills. Bringing these homegrown innovations to an international market is now the key to the future prosperity of the country's electronics industry. The Korean vision is to do in 5 years what the Japanese did in 20. With the world economy entering recession, they may have an uphill struggle ahead. But the people here certainly seem to have the will and the determination it'll take to succeed.
It's dark and you're sure you heard someone moving around down in the storeroom. You want to check if there's actually someone there, but you don't want them to know that you're here. You can't use a torch, so how about this, a handheld people detector? Right, let's take a look. Well, all I can see is a row of dummies there, but yes, the detector's telling me that there's somebody hiding there in the dark at the back. Howard, is that you?
All right, yes, it's me. And apart from an ordinary flashlight, I've got a detector too. Uses an infrared sensor which can pick up changes in temperature as small as 3 degrees Celsius, and it can find people up to 60 metres away. Works in the same way as a lot of burglar alarm systems, but instead of making a sound, this doesn't. It simply gently vibrates in your hand as you pass it over someone, and perhaps you can hear those vibrations if I hold it against a cymbal.
Ah, yes. A very neat idea there. Well, that's all we've got time for tonight, but do join us again next Thursday at 8 o'clock. So, until then, good night.